All right, welcome to another day of our 30-day guitar challenge. Our next topic here is tone production. I think I'm going to definitely make sure this is day number 2 because right behind playing in time, I think in importance probably is our tone. And just like I was saying in the last segment, that I feel like to the listener, the sort of connective tissue with them is really how our music feels and whether or not they can sort of lock into it or not. The other side of that is how our music sounds. It almost sounds too simplistic to say that, but it's easy to kind of lose sight of that the listener doesn't really care if you know your G diminished scales or if your guitar is made out of rosewood or whatever. It either sounds pleasant to them or it doesn't. And just like I tried to play some examples before of nice chords played not so in time and not so nice chords played in time to show that having a groove trumps everything. I think it's the same thing with tone. I think there's certainly no shortage of rock singers that, are not singing profound lyrics, but they just sound, amazing. There's so many rock singers that I would love to just hear, recite the phone book just because of the quality of their tone. So, tone is, again, it's just a connective tissue with the listener and just can't overstate the importance. But it's easy to lose sight of it. So I'm going to give you my 2 cents on tone. Obviously, I'm a steel string guitar player, fingerstyle and pick. But one of my goals with this series is try to make it accessible, even if you play maybe even another instrument. So while I am going to talk kind of specifically about, my opinions on acoustic guitar tone, hopefully, you'll get something out of it no matter what your thing is. I think the most important thing about tone is just your concept of sound and your listening. So I think, for example, I can't sing, but I know people who can, and I know a little bit about it. I know enough that I think that when you're a singer and you're learning, like the first things you learn to do are to sort of stand up straight and take a deep breath and breathe from your belly and to really, you can't not sort of, you are your instrument, so you can't not feel it come out. You can't not be hearing it and paying attention to it. And I just think I have this feeling that singers are just much more in their tone than we are. I think sometimes if you're a guitar player or a piano player, it's easy to just say, well, just press here. And now I've got tone. I've got good tone because I bought this guitar. I mean, that's part of it, but it's a smaller part of it. The real part of it is really sort of paying attention. So I would say that the challenge in this lesson is really to, at the risk of sounding a little woo-woo, just try to be very in your tone. Try to be really conscious of it. Try to just kind of, really be listening all the time. One thing that I'll probably say more than once in this series is to really be kind of listening a little bit more, in my case, with my right ear. I'm really listening to what my right hand is doing because that's where my groove is and my tone is. If you're kind of, listening with your, metaphorically speaking, if you're listening to your left hand, I mean, there's really nothing happening there. You're just making little shapes and little patterns and stuff. But your right hand is really where it's happening. So the challenge is to really kind of listen to it. So an example might be if we take a tune. I'll take like maybe if you're a beginner, and you're learning like a easy classical guitar piece like Romanza, right? Sometimes what people will do is, and rightly so, it's taking all of their ability to kind of hold this thing and put their finger in the right place and put their hands in the right place. And so maybe the last thing they're thinking about is making a beautiful sound. And yet it's funny how many beginners I've had over the years who just are kind of inherently musical. And even though they can barely hold the chord down, are sort of really listening and really trying to make a good sound. But, to take a piece like that, just as an exercise, and just sort of play through it and really think about where your right hand is. And I'm going to sort of elaborate a little bit on that. But again, just as a kind of an exercise, take a piece that and really be listening and paying attention and kind of going back to the other lesson and playing it in time. So even though you have this simple thing, try to make it as beautiful as possible. Now, if you're a classical guitar player, you're probably listening to me going, well, that doesn't sound that great. But the point is that I'm trying my best. I'm really trying to listen to things. I heard some things that I would do differently. So maybe if I do it again, maybe I'll move my right hand a little bit. But the point is awareness, just to keep your awareness. And when you find your mind drifting away to, where do I put my fingers again? Or how do I look while I'm doing this? Or my butt hurts. Just sort of acknowledge those things, but try to keep coming back to really kind of listening to this. Does this feel good? And does this sound good? So that's the challenge for the day. I'm going to try to get into a little bit about my opinions about tone and technique and stuff, both finger style and pick style. But your mileage may vary. And your idea of what a good sound is might be very different than mine. I think the most important thing is that you figure out what a good sound is to you, so you have kind of a benchmark in your head that you're going after. For me, there's a couple good examples of guitar tone that really kind of rocked my world. I think that Tony Rice album, Unit of Measure, I think there's a couple like solo guitar pieces on there, like the intro to Manzanita, that just gave me goosebumps the first time I heard it. Like it just, and it will today if I hear it again. It just sounds like a huge piano to me. And many years before that, when I was younger, Alex DeGrassi's like second album in particular, Slow Circle, that was also something that I kind of heard in my head. So, again, the idea is kind of get an idea of what really sounds good to you. But for me, it was always kind of big piano-like kind of sound, and dynamic, and lots of overtones. So to that end, I think for me, what I'm trying to do is not get in the way of the tone. So one of the things that I like to think about is to kind of let the guitar kind of resonate. So I try not to put a lot of my body on top of the guitar, because this is really the speaker. So if I'm kind of, hugging the guitar really tightly and I've got a lot of skin on it, that's sort of not good. Sometimes when people play fingerstyle, they'll really kind of push down with their pinky, for example, and that might stiffen up the top. I do use my pinky, but I try to keep it really light. Later on, when we talk about the flat pick, I know a lot of people will press down on the bridge. I think it's fine to sort of skim it, but I don't think that's the place where you really want to be dampening things. So just, I guess, in general, just sort of letting the acoustic guitar do its thing. I also try to get it off my stomach, which as the years go by, is getting harder and harder to do. But if there was a camera over here, you'd see that there's some air, because I don't want to sort of push this up against my stomach or a big sweater or something like that and dampen the back either. So I want to feel like the guitar is just kind of out and ringing. So when I hit a chord, I'm really thinking about that. The other extreme is if I kind of press it up against my stomach and put a bunch of my arm on there, it gets much, you can hear it as I kind of let go, how it opens up, So I just try to kind of keep it off me and let it ring. Kind of incidentally, like if I have some open strings, I'll add a little by vibrato just by moving the guitar a little bit. To me, that also is kind of adding some interest, but it's also kind of maybe making sustain last a little bit longer. So that's something I think about. In terms of the left hand, I think getting a good guitar sound is, later we'll talk about technique and stuff and maybe just using a light touch for other reasons, but using a light touch and getting up close to the fret for tone reasons is important too. The further you are from the fret, the harder you have to press down. You're going to probably make the note go sharp, and you might introduce some buzz, right? So if you get up close to the fret, it's a cleaner sound. So a light touch up close to the frets, so I get nice kind of clean bell-like sound. And then the use of the vibrato, maybe by moving the guitar or by moving my fingers, But that's kind of it with the left hand. It's really kind of more about the right hand for me. So fingerstyle, I use something called Alaska picks because I just wasn't born with guitar nails. They're just really thin and short, so it was really never an option for me. And acrylics and things like that haven't worked. And even though my first record, Acoustic Jazz Guitar Solos, long out of print, was just flesh, I've since gone on to use these Alaska picks, which I file fairly short but just to get kind of a mix of flesh and the pick, to kind of get a little more volume and a little bit more complex a sound. But I really spend a lot of time sort of shaping them. This pair is actually kind of trashed at the moment, but when I buy them, I file them down fairly short, and I use 1500 grit sandpaper to kind of get a nice glassy edge. And certainly you can explore YouTube and find phenomenal classical guitar players detailing everything you ever want to know about fingernail shape and stuff. But that's my basic gear thing. And for me, a lot of the tone production is about just sort of getting the right angle. So I'm getting the right mix of pick and finger. So if I'm just getting the pick, it's not so great. And if I'm just getting the skin, it doesn't quite have the dynamics. But by getting a little bit of both, it really kind of works better for me. So I think a lot about the angle at which I'm hitting the string. Hopefully that kind of makes sense. And then probably more importantly, I'm thinking about where I'm hitting the string. So I like to I don't think there's like one spot necessarily. I try to move around, but I really love, I'm no classical guitar player, but one of the things I always loved about Segovia is how he really kind of moved his hand around and really showed us like all the tonal possibilities on a guitar. I'm no piano player, but as far as I know, you sort of hit the key and that's what happens. But here on the guitar, it's kind of like the piano hammer can land in a whole bunch of different places to get different sounds. So it's fun to kind of explore that and be expressive. But so I guess my technique is sort of like classical guitar. And again, I'll sort of cop out and say there's so many great videos out there of great players at showing you what their right hand technique looks like. But basically, I'm coming over so that the big knuckle of the finger is kind of over the tip of the finger. And so I'm really kind of using more of that big knuckle than anything. And again, getting on the side of the finger. And I feel like that's getting me a good amount of tone. Occasionally I'll kind of push down a little bit, almost like a rest stroke. I'll talk about that a little bit more when I switch to talking to pick tone. But these are all little things that I think about. And I'm going to do a little right hand technique lesson further on down the road here. But let's move on to using the pick. So when I do flat pick, I think some of the really important things that I'd like to share is that you have to think about the physics here. Not that I know much about physics, but one of the most important things I think for me is to pick kind of down into the guitar most of the time. And I think what happens is that when you pick kind of across, primarily across, you're kind of activating the string, kind of moving in a more side to side way. But when I push down into the guitar, I think the string is more primarily going up and down, and it's activating the top more. So an example is if I pick sort of across, you can hear that, which sounds fine. But if I pick down, you can hear it's bringing more bloom into it. So I'll try to shut up and do a little before and after. So before, after. So that's straight across and down into it. Anyway, you get it. Pick angle is, many times more important than the difference between, say, one kind of rosewood and the other. So really think about your pick angle and experiment. That said, sometimes when you start playing faster, all bets are off. But when I'm playing slow and in a controlled way, I'm really trying to do that. Obviously, on the upstroke, you're not going to be able to push down into the guitar, but you are pushing away from the guitar. And so I think that that's still activating the string in the same way. So if I'm picking down up, kind of across the string, it sounds okay, but down up, kind of more down into the guitar, you're hearing a lot more overtones. So that's my main sort of tip for using a flat pick. Again, I'm going to cop out. There's a million great videos out there about people who are much better at flat picking than I am, and then you can learn about all the different ways you can hold it and stuff. But I'll just share quickly that I go back and forth between sort of not touching the guitar and very lightly touching the guitar. I'm currently in a phase where I'm very lightly touching the guitar with my pinky, but I'm very conscious that I'm not like I used to when I was younger, like really push down into the guitar and feel all that muscle tension, which is bad, but also I think you're dampening the top. And you sure don't want to have like all your fingers on the face of the guitar or your palm like really pushing down on the bridge. Again, this is all going to dampen our tone. It might make you feel more stable. I think that's why we do those things. But ultimately, I think kind of getting off the guitar as much as you can is a good thing. So that's my main thing, is just kind of off the guitar, and sometimes I'm resting, sometimes I'm not. Gear-wise, I really love like a 3-corner pick. I think, well, first of all, you have thrice the picking area, but I think more importantly, getting away from that sort of teardrop shape, you have more of the side of the pick. And I think of a pick somewhat, I mean, in kind of a, you know, a microcosm way, like bowing, you know? So like when you pick the note, if you just use the tip, it kind of sounds okay. But when you get that, when you use the motion I was describing earlier, and you really think about sort of rotating the pick clockwise a little bit. I know people who do it the other way and they sound great too. But I go clockwise a little bit, and you're kind of getting kind of like the ramping of the nail when I was talking about classical fingerstyle technique, but here you're sort of ramping the side of the pick. And I think that that's kind of giving you a lot of extra beef. So that's why I like this shape. It's 3 corners, and it also has kind of this rounded shape. I use a pick made by Wiegand, so you can go to wiegandpicks.com or whatever, and I use a 1.5 millimeter pick. I have other picks that are similar to that, blue chip, tortoiseshell, but I always use this shape for that reason, and it works good for me. In a long time ago, I made a video. I'm probably not going to go there now, where I had a bunch of like cheap celluloid picks and I go back and forth. But I think that a little bit thicker is definitely better. That's the primary energy in the guitar, is these strings, and this is the thing that's getting that going. So your pick is super, super important if you're into tone and flat picking. So there's that. So I'm going to wind up this video. Again, I'm going to talk more about technique in the near future. But remember, the challenge is to really listen to your right hand and really listen to tone. Think about whose tone you like. See if you can just sort of imagine that, because really tone, big part is your guitar and the gear that you use and your technique. But the biggest part's between your ears. It's your concept of tone. All right, over and out.